The eviction notice was only one piece of paper, but in Emily Carter's hands, it felt heavier than everything she owned. The words appeared beneath a breaking news report playing silently on the giant screen inside William Anderson's penthouse office. The billionaire CEO had seen thousands of headlines in his life. Market crashes, company expansions, record-breaking deals, stories about people he would never meet and places he would never visit. But this story made him stop. On the screen was a young woman standing outside an apartment building in Chicago, holding a worn suitcase in one hand and her 5-year-old son Noah's backpack in the other. Rain tapped softly against the sidewalk as reporters surrounded the scene. The caption read, "Single mother evicted after dispute with luxury apartment management." Emily Carter did not look like someone waiting to be rescued. She stood quietly, one hand resting on her son's shoulder, trying to keep him calm while strangers watched. "Mom," Noah whispered, looking up at her with tired eyes. "Where are we going now?" Emily forced a gentle smile. "Somewhere we can start again, sweetheart." William watched those words leave her lips. There was no anger, no blame, only a quiet strength that felt strangely familiar. The camera moved closer, catching the building address behind her. William's expression changed instantly. He leaned toward the screen, his eyes fixed on the numbers displayed above the entrance. 4817 Madison Avenue. His building. The apartment complex belonged to Anderson Heights Real Estate, the company he had built from a small investment firm into one of the largest property groups in the country. William had signed thousands of documents connected to that building. He knew its value. He knew its occupancy rate. He knew its monthly revenue. But he had never known the name of a single person living inside it. Until now. "That can't be right," he whispered. His assistant, Claire, entered the room carrying a folder. "Mr. Anderson, your 2 p.m. meeting is ready." William did not move. "Cancel it." Claire looked surprised. In 10 years, she had rarely heard him cancel anything. "Is everything okay?" He looked. Back at the screen. Emily was now kneeling beside Noah, carefully packing the last few belongings from their apartment into a cardboard box. A small stuffed bear sat on top of the pile. "Find out everything about apartment 8B, William said quietly. "Who approved the eviction? Why it happened? Every detail." Claire followed his gaze to the television. "The woman." William nodded. For the first time in years, the numbers on a report did not matter. The person behind them did. He had built buildings that reached the sky, but somehow he had forgotten to look at the people standing beneath them. And as Emily Carter walked away from the only home she had known with nothing but a suitcase and her son's hand in hers, William Anderson realized something that would change the rest of his life. He owned the building, but he had no idea what was happening inside it. The morning after the broadcast, Emily Carter woke up before her alarm. She had learned to do that over the years. When life became uncertain, sleep became something she could no longer fully trust. The small apartment that had once felt like a fresh beginning now looked like a collection of memories packed into cardboard boxes. A coffee mug with a tiny crack sat beside the kitchen sink. Noah's drawings were still taped to the refrigerator. His favorite blue jacket hung near the door, waiting for a place they no longer had. Emily took a slow breath and looked at her son sleeping peacefully on the couch. She had moved the cushions together to make him a small bed for the night. It was not perfect, but she had learned that a home was not always made of walls. Sometimes it was made of the person who stayed beside you when everything else disappeared. "Mommy," Noah's sleepy voice broke the silence. Emily turned around with a smile. "Good morning, buddy. Are we moving today?" he asked. For a moment, she felt the weight of the question. A child should have been thinking about school, cartoons, and weekend plans, not where he would sleep next. But Emily reached for his hand and smiled. "We are going to find a new place. And we are going to be okay." Across the city, William Anderson sat inside his glass office, staring at a file that had arrived overnight. Apartment 8B. Tenant history. Payment records. Management reports. He expected to find a difficult tenant. Someone who ignored warnings. Someone who created problems. Instead, he found a woman who had lived in the same apartment for 3 years, paid consistently, and received multiple positive notes from neighbors. Emily Carter had never been a problem. She had been someone who had been overlooked. William turned another page. The eviction was connected to additional fees added by the building management company. Late processing charges, administrative penalties, repair costs that had never been clearly explained. Small numbers on a spreadsheet. But behind those numbers was a mother holding a suitcase on television. William leaned back in his chair, remembering something his father once told him when he was young. A company is not built with buildings. It is built with people. He had spent years chasing growth, expanding properties, and increasing investments. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that lesson. Meanwhile, Emily carried the last box from the apartment with Noah walking beside her. She paused for a moment at the doorway, not because she wanted to stay, because she wanted to remember the place where she had raised her son during the hardest years of her life. She touched the door frame gently and whispered, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Noah looked up at her. "Will our next home be better?" Emily looked down at him. She did not know the answer. She did not know where they would go. She did not know that the man who owned the building was already searching for the truth behind what happened to them. But she knew one thing. As long as she had her son's hand in hers, she would keep moving forward. And somewhere across the city, William Anderson was beginning to understand that the greatest mistake he had ever made was not losing money. It was forgetting to see the people behind it. The next morning, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Cars filled the streets, coffee shops opened their doors, and thousands of people rushed toward another busy day. But inside the headquarters of Anderson Heights Real Estate, William Anderson was still focused on one apartment. Apartment 8B. For the first time in years, a single address mattered more to him than a $100 million deal. William stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, looking down at the city he had spent his life building. From that height, everything looked organized. The roads looked like lines on a map. The buildings looked like pieces on a chessboard. But the file on his desk reminded him that every building had a story hidden behind its walls. His assistant Claire placed another folder beside him. "I found the information you requested, Mr. Anderson." William opened it carefully. Inside were more details about Emily Carter's life. 29 years old. Single mother. 5-year-old son. Stable rental history. No complaints from neighbors. No missed payments before the recent dispute. He paused when he saw a note from the previous year. Tenant assisted an elderly resident during a medical appointment and helped organize a community food collection. William read the sentence twice. A woman who was struggling to keep her own life together had still found time to help others. He looked at the eviction report again. The numbers were the same. The signatures were the same. But now they felt different. They were no longer just numbers. They represented a mother who had spent the night on a couch with her child because someone inside his company decided she was only a problem on a spreadsheet. "Who manages this property?" William asked. Claire checked the report. "A company called Sterling Property Management. They handle several of our residential buildings." William nodded slowly. "Set up a meeting with their regional director." Claire hesitated. "Do you want them to know why?" William closed the folder. "No, not yet." He needed the truth before anyone had a chance to prepare an answer. Meanwhile, Emily was sitting at a small diner near the bus station with Noah beside her. The restaurant was warm, but her thoughts were somewhere else. She counted the money in her wallet quietly. Enough for breakfast. Enough for transportation. Not enough for many more days. Noah noticed her expression and pushed half of his pancake toward her. "You need some too, Mom." Emily smiled softly. "You should eat it. You are growing." "You always say that," Noah replied. "Because it is true." For a moment, Emily forgot about the eviction notice. She forgot about the boxes waiting in storage. She only saw her son smiling across the table. She did not know that someone was looking into her story. She did not know that the owner of the building she had lost was finally learning what happened inside it. And William Anderson did not know yet that the woman he was trying to help would become the person who changed the way he saw everything he had built. William Anderson had built his reputation by making decisions quickly. In business, hesitation could cost millions. Every successful company required someone willing to look at the facts, remove emotion, and choose the most practical path forward. But as he sat across from the executives of Sterling Property Management, William realized that the facts were not always the truth. The meeting room was quiet when the regional director, Marcus Bennett, entered with a confident smile. "Mr. Anderson, I understand there was a concern regarding one of our properties." William placed the eviction file on the table. "Apartment 8B. Marcus looked down briefly. "The tenant issue?" The way he said those words caught William's attention. Tenant issue. Not Emily Carter. Not a mother. Not a person. Just an issue. "Explain what happened," William said. Marcus opened his folder. The resident failed to meet certain financial obligations. Our team followed standard procedures. William listened carefully. The explanation sounded polished. Every sentence had been prepared. Every answer had a reason. But something was missing. Did anyone speak with her? William asked. Marcus paused. Our office sent notices. That was not my question. The room became silent. Marcus adjusted his posture. I believe our staff handled the situation appropriately. William looked at the papers in front of him. He had spent years surrounded by people who knew how to protect numbers, contracts, and profits. But he was beginning to wonder how. Many people knew. William Anderson had spent most of his adult life believing that problems could be solved from a distance. A report on his desk. A meeting in a conference room. A signature at the bottom of a document. That was how decisions were made at the highest level. But after reading Emily Carter's story, he realized something uncomfortable. The farther he stood from people's lives, the easier it became to forget they were real. The next morning, William made a decision that surprised everyone in his company. He wanted to meet Emily Carter. Not through a formal appointment. Not surrounded by lawyers or executives. He wanted to speak with her as the person behind apartment 8B. Claire looked surprised when he explained his plan. Do you want her to know who you are? She asked. William looked down at the address written in the report. Not yet. He paused. I need to understand what happened before I ask her to trust me. Later that afternoon, William drove to the community center where Emily was temporarily staying. For someone who owned a collection of luxury vehicles, he chose a simple car and arrived without any company representatives. The building was modest, with a small entrance and a quiet hallway filled with signs offering support programs for local families. It was a world far away from the glass towers he knew. Emily was sitting near the front desk, filling out job applications while Noah colored beside her. When William approached, she looked up with a cautious but polite expression. Can I help you? She asked. My name is William, he replied. I wanted to ask about your experience with the apartment management company. Emily studied him for a moment. She had learned to be careful with strangers offering help. Too often, kindness came with conditions. Are you from the property company? She asked. William chose his words carefully. I am connected to the company. Her expression changed slightly. Then I think you already know their side of the story. There was no anger in her voice. Only exhaustion. William sat across from her. I want to hear yours. Emily looked at Noah, who was carefully coloring a picture of a house with a bright yellow door. Then she looked back at William. I never wanted special treatment, she said quietly. I only wanted someone to look at the situation and realize there was a person behind the paperwork. William listened without interrupting. Emily explained how she had tried to communicate with the management office. How she had asked for clarification about the additional charges. How every conversation ended with another form, another notice, another reminder that the system was moving faster than she could keep up with. I understand that businesses need rules, Emily said. But sometimes people need understanding too. Her words stayed with him. William noticed something else. She never once asked for money. She never complained about losing a luxury apartment. She only talked about fairness and making sure other families did not experience the same thing. Before leaving, William looked at Noah's drawing. That is a nice house, he said. Noah smiled. It is our next home. Mom says we can make any place feel like home. William carried those words with him long after he walked back to his car. He had entered expecting to learn about a tenant dispute. Instead, he had met someone who reminded him of a lesson he had forgotten. A home was never measured by square footage or market value. It was measured by the people who filled it with care. And for the first time in years, William Anderson wondered if building something valuable meant more than creating something expensive. The days after William Anderson met Emily Carter felt different from any other days in his career. Meetings continued. Phones continued ringing. Contracts still waited for his approval. But something had changed. Every decision now carried a question he had never asked before. Who does this affect? Inside the headquarters of Anderson Heights Real Estate, William reviewed reports that once would have been simple numbers. Now every line represented a person. Every apartment represented a family. Every complaint represented someone who had tried to be heard. Claire noticed the change in him. You have been reading tenant reports for 3 days, she said gently. William looked up from his desk. Because I should have been reading them years ago. Meanwhile, Emily was doing everything she could to rebuild her life. She accepted temporary work at a local office while continuing to search for a more stable position. Each morning, She prepared Noah's breakfast, helped him get ready for school, and reminded him that difficult moments did not define their future. But even during her hardest days, Emily still found ways to help others. One afternoon, she noticed an elderly woman at the community center struggling with several grocery bags. Without hesitation, Emily stepped forward and helped carry them inside. "Thank you, dear," the woman said with a warm smile. "You always seem to notice when someone needs help." Emily smiled softly. "Someone noticed me once when I needed it." The woman smiled, not knowing those simple words would soon reach someone who needed to hear them. Later that evening, William received another message from Claire. It was about Emily. "I found more information about her time at the building," Claire said when they spoke over the phone. William listened carefully. "What did you find?" Several residents mentioned her in their feedback. Not complaints. Thank you notes. Claire opened the records. She helped organize a small food collection during the winter. She checked on older residents who lived alone. She even helped a neighbor fill out paperwork when they did not understand the forms. William leaned back in his chair. The woman his company removed from her apartment had spent years making that same building feel more like a community. He thought about the difference between ownership and responsibility. He owned thousands of units, but Emily had understood what made them meaningful. The next day, William visited the building himself. For the first time, he walked through the hallways without an executive team around him. He noticed small details he had ignored before. Children's drawings taped near doors. Plants sitting outside apartments. Neighbors greeting each other in the hallway. It was not just a property. It was a collection of lives. When he reached apartment 8B, he stopped. The door was closed. The place was empty now, but he could almost imagine Emily and Noah inside, creating a home from ordinary moments. William quietly placed his hand on the folder he carried. Inside were the first plans for changing how his company treated residents. He had spent years building a business empire. Now he understood that an empire without compassion was only a collection of buildings. And the woman who had lost her home was teaching him how to build something far more important. The morning sun passed through the windows of Anderson Heights real estate, but for William Anderson, the office felt different than it had before. The same polished floors reflected the same lights. The same employees walked through the same halls. Yet he no longer saw only a successful company. He saw the people behind every decision. William had spent years protecting the reputation of his empire. Now he understood that reputation was not built by advertisements or expensive buildings. It was built by how people felt when they walked through those doors. The first major change began with a meeting. William sat across from the executives responsible for residential management, including Marcus Bennett from Sterling Property Management. The room was quiet as William placed a stack of documents on the table. "These reports show a pattern," William said calmly. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson, our team followed company procedures." William nodded. "That is exactly the problem. Procedures were followed, but people were forgotten. No one spoke. For years, conversations like this had been about profits and performance. This time, it was about responsibility. William announced a complete review of resident policies across every property owned by his company. He ordered clearer communication, fair evaluations of disputes, and a system where residents could speak directly to someone instead of receiving automated responses. Meanwhile, Emily Carter was focused on creating stability for Noah. She had found a small apartment that was not perfect, but it was safe and peaceful. Noah placed his books on a small shelf near the window and smiled. "I like this place, Mom." Emily looked around the room. There were still empty spaces. There were still things they needed. But she smiled because she knew something important. A new beginning did not require everything to be perfect. It only required hope. A few days later, Emily received an unexpected phone call. The caller introduced himself as a representative from Anderson Heights Real Estate. They wanted to discuss the situation involving her previous apartment. Emily felt cautious. She had learned that promises were easy to make and harder to keep. "Why are you contacting me now?" she asked. The representative explained that the company was reviewing past cases and wanted her perspective. Emily agreed to meet, not because she expected anything, but because she believed someone needed to tell the truth. When she arrived at the office, she noticed the same building where she had once felt invisible. But this time, people looked up and greeted her. She was guided into a conference room where William Anderson was waiting. Emily stopped when she saw him. She remembered the man who had listened to her at the community center. She remembered his questions and his quiet attention, but she still did not know the full truth. William stood and took a breath. Emily, there is something you should know. His voice was steady, but his expression carried regret. I am William Anderson. I own Anderson Heights real estate. The room became silent. Emily looked at him, trying to understand. The man who had listened to her story was the same man who owned the company connected to the moment that changed her life. William did not make excuses. He simply said, I cannot change what happened, but I can take responsibility for making sure it does not happen to someone else. And for the first time since losing her apartment, Emily saw something she had not expected. Not a promise, not an offer, but genuine accountability. For a few seconds, neither Emily Carter nor William Anderson said anything. The office around them felt unusually quiet. Outside the glass windows, the city continued moving. People walking through crowded streets, cars passing through intersections, and life continuing as if nothing had changed. But inside that room, too, people from completely different worlds were facing a truth neither of them expected. Emily looked at William carefully. She remembered the conversation they had at the community center. She remembered how he listened without interrupting. She remembered thinking he was simply someone who cared enough to ask questions. Now she understood why his words had carried so much weight. You owned the building the entire time? She asked softly. William nodded. Yes. He did not try to defend himself. He did not explain how many responsibilities came with running a company. He simply accepted the silence that followed. I should have known what was happening inside my own properties, he said. I should have created a system where people were heard before they reached a breaking point. Emily looked down at her hands. For months, she had felt invisible. She had written emails. She had made phone calls. She had tried to explain her situation. But every answer felt like it came from a machine instead of a person. I did not need someone to save me, she said. I needed someone to notice. Those words stayed with William. They were not spoken with anger. They were spoken with honesty. And somehow, that made them more powerful. William placed a folder on the table. This is the beginning of a new resident support program. But I do not want this to be something created only from my office. I want to understand what people actually need. Emily looked at the folder, but did not reach for it immediately. Why are you showing me this? She asked. William answered without hesitation. Because you are the person who showed me what I was missing. Over the following weeks, changes began throughout Anderson Heights real estate. The company created new communication channels for residents. Management teams received new training. Reviews were conducted with more attention to individual circumstances. For the first time, people living in the buildings felt like their voices mattered. Emily became involved in the new program, not as someone receiving help, but as someone whose experience could help others. She visited properties, listened to residents, and shared ideas about making communities stronger. William noticed something surprising. The woman who had lost almost everything had the clearest understanding of what his company needed. She understood that people did not want perfect buildings. They wanted to feel respected inside them. One afternoon, William visited one of the residential properties with Emily. They walked through the hallway where neighbors greeted each other and children laughed nearby. It reminded him of the moment he first saw Emily on television. Back then, he saw a problem connected to one of his buildings. Now he saw a person who had helped transform his entire company. You know, William said quietly, I spent years trying to build the best real estate company in the country. Emily looked at him. And now, William smiled slightly. Now I am trying to build a company that deserves the people who live inside those buildings. Emily looked around the hallway and saw something she had not seen before. Change was not always loud. Sometimes it started with one person finally deciding to listen. And sometimes the person who teaches the greatest lesson is the one everyone else ignored. 1 year later, the morning light touched the windows of Anderson Heights real estate, creating the same golden reflection that once represented success to William Anderson. But now, when he looked at those buildings, he saw something different. He no longer saw only investments, property values, or financial reports. He saw families having breakfast before school. He saw neighbors greeting each other in hallways. He saw people creating memories inside the places his company had built. The transformation had not happened overnight. It started with one uncomfortable truth. A company could grow larger every year and still lose sight of the people it was meant to serve. William remembered the day he watched Emily Carter standing outside apartment 8B with her son and a suitcase. At that moment, He thought he was discovering a mistake inside his company. But now he understood he had discovered something much bigger. He had discovered the importance of paying attention. Emily had become one of the most respected voices in the new resident care initiative. She never forgot what it felt like to be ignored, and that experience became the reason she worked so hard to make sure others were heard. She visited buildings across the city, spoke with residents, and helped create programs that connected people with real support. She did not want anyone else to feel invisible. One afternoon, William visited the community center where Emily had once stayed with Noah, the same place where he first met her. Noah was older now, carrying a backpack and proudly showing William a school project. "I made a drawing of our old building and our new home," Noah said. William looked at the picture. On one side was a tall apartment building. On the other side was a small house with a bright yellow door. "Why did you draw both?" William asked. Noah smiled. "Because both places were important. One was where we learned to be strong. The other is where we started again." William looked at Emily, and she smiled. Some lessons came from boardrooms. Others came from simple conversations with a child. Years earlier, William believed success meant reaching higher than everyone else. Emily taught him that success also meant looking around and making sure nobody was left behind. The company continued to grow, but its purpose had changed. It was no longer just about creating buildings. It was about creating places where people felt valued. As William stood outside one of the properties that started this journey, he watched residents walk through the entrance. A father carried groceries. A child laughed while holding a school backpack. An elderly couple sat together near the garden. Ordinary moments. But now he understood that ordinary moments were the reason buildings existed in the first place. William once owned thousands of homes. But Emily Carter was the person who reminded him what a home truly meant. Because a building is made of walls, but a home is made of kindness. And sometimes, the person who has the least can be the one who teaches someone with everything what truly matters.